When a flight attendant kicks a black CEO and his family off a plane, she believes she's handling a routine disruption. But as the situation unfolds, she discovers the shocking truth. They own the very airline she works for. What happens next will challenge her assumptions and turn the tables in an unforgettable way. The flight began just like any other, with the usual pre-flight routine. Passengers boarded the plane, took their assigned seats, stowed their carry-on luggage in the overhead bins, and buckled up. Everyone seemed eager to settle in for the journey, the hum of conversation blending with the overhead announcements. It was a busy time for the airline, as most flights were fully booked and the crew worked diligently to ensure that all passengers were seated and ready for takeoff. Among the many travelers, a black CEO and his family were quietly taking their seats, appearing as just another group of passengers preparing for their flight. However, what seemed like a routine boarding process quickly evolved into a tension-filled situation, fueled by a minor misunderstanding and the flight attendant's overzealous handling of the matter. The issue began with the seating arrangement. A simple mix-up, a confusion of seat assignments, was all it took to set the stage for the confrontation. The CEO and his family had been assigned seats, but when they arrived at their rows, it became apparent that the seating chart was incorrect. A few seats were double booked, and some passengers were seated in the wrong places. It was a common occurrence in the airline industry, but it had the potential to cause delays, and in a busy airport environment, any small issue could escalate quickly. The flight attendant, tasked with managing the situation, immediately approached the family with a look of mild annoyance, ready to resolve the issue efficiently. Her goal was simple: get the passengers in their proper seats so the flight could proceed without delay. However, things didn't go as smoothly as she expected. The CEO and his family were calm and collected, understanding that mistakes happen. They politely explained that their seat assignments appeared to have been mixed up. They weren't complaining or causing a scene. Instead, they simply wanted to resolve the mix-up as quickly and quietly as possible. Yet, the flight attendant, who had dealt with many similar situations over the years, was becoming visibly frustrated. She had already dealt with several delays and was eager to move on to the next task. The small seating issue felt like an unnecessary disruption to the otherwise routine boarding process. Her frustration quickly turned into impatience, and she began to assume that the CEO's calm demeanor and polite tone were signs of him being a passive passenger, someone who didn't understand the pressure that the crew was under. She mistook his composed behavior for indifference to the situation, interpreting his polite requests as passive resistance to the airline's authority. Her mind, focused on keeping things running smoothly, made a snap judgment about the family. To her, they were just another group of passengers who were making things more complicated than they needed to be. She wanted to get them seated and get the flight off the ground. Without fully understanding the dynamics of the situation or the people involved, the flight attendant made a rash decision. She asked the family to leave the plane, dismissing their polite explanations and misunderstandings. She had assumed they were being difficult, and in her mind, the best way to handle the situation was to remove them from the aircraft entirely. Her words were curt, and her tone was firm, showing little patience for what she perceived to be unnecessary disruption. The family, still calm and composed, was taken aback by her response. They hadn't been demanding or aggressive in any way, and yet they were being escorted off the plane. What began as a minor seating mix-up now had the potential to escalate into something far more serious. The flight attendant's actions were based on an assumption, a misreading of the situation. She believed that the CEO and his family were nothing more than regular passengers who simply didn't understand the stress of air travel. The reality, however, was far from what she imagined. The man she had just dismissed as another passenger was the CEO of the airline itself, and his family was not only important to him personally, but to the company on a much deeper level. What the flight attendant didn't know was that she had just made an irreversible mistake, one that would have consequences far beyond the confines of the airplane cabin. In her attempt to maintain order, she had failed to recognize the potential consequences of her actions. What she saw as a minor disruption was, in fact, a huge misstep that would soon come back to haunt her. As she continued to carry out her duties, unaware of the magnitude of her decision, she unknowingly set the stage for a revelation that would challenge not only her own assumptions but the very structure of her workplace. The flight that had started as a routine operation was about to become anything but ordinary. The CEO and his family were taken aback by the flight attendant's sudden decision to remove them from the plane. It was not just the confusion or the inconvenience, it was the shock of being treated with such disrespect. Despite the situation, they remained composed, understanding that their immediate response would determine the course of events. The CEO, a man who had built his career through years of hard work and strategic decision-making, knew that keeping a level head in moments like these was crucial. His family, equally composed, followed his lead, refusing to let the unjust treatment get the best of them. They exchanged quiet words among themselves, staying calm despite the escalating tension. They had experienced challenges throughout their lives, and this was no different. The flight attendants' actions were frustrating, but they were accustomed to adversity, whether in business or in personal matters. Their reaction was not one of anger, but of measured restraint. They understood that reacting rashly would only add fuel to the fire and potentially escalate the situation further. The CEO, while shaken by the unexpected treatment, had learned over the years that maintaining dignity in such moments was not just a matter of personal character, but a reflection of leadership. His success in business had taught him that people would often make assumptions or mistakes, and it was his responsibility to handle those situations with professionalism. This was no different. He calmly tried to explain the misunderstanding to the flight attendant, but his efforts were met with resistance. It became clear that the flight attendant was not interested in listening. What troubled him most, however, was the realization that someone could act with such dismissiveness without any understanding of who they were or what they represented. The family, accustomed to being treated with respect in their professional and personal lives, were surprised by the flight attendant's blatant disregard for their status. Yet, the CEO remained focused on the bigger picture, choosing to handle the situation with the kind of grace that had always defined him. Even though he was deeply troubled by the incident, he knew that this moment, like many others before, was an opportunity to set an example of composure and strength. As the flight attendant was called to the cockpit, she was unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. The airline's crew had been informed of the situation, and the moment she stepped into the cockpit, she was met with a wave of urgency. The captain, who had been briefed about the incident, delivered the revelation that would forever alter her understanding of the situation. The man she had just kicked off the plane, the one she had assumed was a regular passenger causing a disturbance, was not just anyone. He was the CEO of the airline, and more significantly, he was the owner of the entire company. The truth hit her with such force that for a brief moment she couldn't process it. The realization that she had just dismissed the leader of the very organization that paid her salary was overwhelming. Her mind raced as she replayed the events that led up to this moment, unable to escape the gravity of her actions. The CEO, whose name had never crossed her mind in that moment of frustration, was not a regular traveler. He was the one who made the decisions that shaped the airline. He was the one whose vision and leadership had built the company from the ground up. And yet, she had treated him as just another passenger, making assumptions based on nothing more than a minor seating issue. The flight attendant's heart sank as the weight of the situation settled in. Her hasty judgment, her inability to recognize the man in front of her for who he truly was, had cost her far more than she could have imagined. She was now painfully aware of how her actions could have lasting repercussions not just for her, but for the reputation of the airline itself. The flight attendant had thought she was handling a small, inconsequential disruption, but she now understood that she had just crossed a line that was anything but minor. The realization of who she had just kicked off the plane felt like a punch to the gut, a mistake that could cost her not just her job, but any future in this industry. The consequences of the flight attendant's actions were swift and far-reaching. News of the incident quickly circulated within the airline, as employees and passengers alike became aware of the unfortunate situation. While some were shocked by the flight attendant's behavior, others were quick to express their opinions. The airline's management soon became involved, and an internal investigation was launched to address the incident. There was growing concern about the potential damage to the airline's reputation, especially considering the high-profile nature of the CEO and his family. The incident threatened to undermine the company's public image, and leaders within the organization knew that swift action was necessary. However, the CEO, in an unexpected move, chose not to escalate the matter in a dramatic fashion. Instead of public condemnation or corporate retribution, he opted for a more measured approach. He understood the value of learning from mistakes, and he wanted to use this moment as an opportunity to teach a deeper lesson about respect and assumptions. The CEO believed that people, especially those in positions of power, should be judged by their actions and character, not by superficial perceptions. He knew the flight attendant had acted out of frustration and made a snap judgment, but he also understood the importance of growth and the potential for people to learn from their mistakes. Rather than exacting severe punishment, he chose to address the issue privately, preferring to use the incident as an opportunity for reflection and understanding. For the flight attendant, however, the personal and professional consequences were unavoidable. The realization that she had acted rashly and misjudged a situation that involved one of the most important figures in the company was a bitter pill to swallow. While she didn't face immediate termination, she had to contend with the fallout of her actions. Her colleagues, who had once seen her as a capable and trusted member of the team, began to view her differently. There was a sense of unease that followed her in the workplace, the knowledge that she had mishandled a situation that could have easily been avoided with a little more patience and understanding. She knew that her credibility had been compromised, and it would take time to rebuild the trust that she had lost. Despite this, she realized that this misstep, though costly, was also a powerful lesson. The incident had forced her to confront her own assumptions about people and how quickly judgments could be made based on appearances. The flight attendant understood that this was a chance for her to learn and grow, and while the consequences were significant, they were also an opportunity for personal development. It was clear that the road ahead would be challenging, but the experience would ultimately shape her future interactions and approach to her work. In the aftermath of the incident, the flight attendant was left with a deep sense of reflection. The experience forced her to confront her own biases and assumptions in a way she had never anticipated. What seemed like a minor inconvenience at first had evolved into a powerful lesson in humility. She had judged the CEO and his family based on superficial impressions, thinking they were just another group of passengers causing unnecessary disruptions. Yet, she learned the hard way that appearances can be deceiving. The CEO, who she had dismissed without a second thought, was not only a key figure in the airline, but also a person deserving of respect and understanding no matter the circumstance. Her immediate reaction, driven by frustration, had clouded her judgment, and she now saw how quickly assumptions could lead to mistakes that affected not just others, but herself as well. The flight attendant's realization was a painful one, but it was also a pivotal moment in her personal growth. She came to understand that her profession, which required her to interact with people from all walks of life, demanded a level of empathy and respect that went beyond the surface. She couldn't afford to let her frustrations with minor inconveniences dictate her responses. The event served as a stark reminder of the importance of seeing people for who they truly are, not just based on what they looked like or the role they played in a given moment. Everyone had their own story, their own experiences, and it was crucial to approach each interaction with an open mind and a sense of respect. For the CEO, the incident provided an opportunity for reflection on his own role as a leader. He chose not to make a spectacle out of the situation, even though he had every right to do so. He didn't seek public apology or retribution, recognizing that the flight attendant's actions were not malicious, but rather the result of a misjudgment born of frustration. His response was a testament to his humility, understanding that mistakes happen and that people could learn from them. By remaining silent and allowing the situation to unfold without drawing attention to it, the CEO demonstrated grace under pressure. He understood that leadership was not just about power or authority, but about using every experience, even the uncomfortable ones, as an opportunity for growth and learning. He made the decision to approach the situation with empathy, using it as a reminder of how easily people could be underestimated and how important it was not to let one's status define how they treated others. The CEO's decision not to punish the flight attendant publicly was a calculated one. He realized that the situation had far reaching implications. It wasn't just about his family being unjustly removed from the plane, it was about the message that the airline sent to its employees and customers. By choosing not to escalate the situation, he demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence and maturity that many of his peers might not have understood. It was a reminder that while the airline's brand was built on excellence and efficiency, it was equally important to build a culture of respect and humility within the organization. If employees were expected to treat passengers with care and respect, the same values had to be demonstrated from the top down. This was a lesson that the CEO would carry forward, not just in dealing with situations involving his employees, but in how he interacted with everyone he encountered. It reinforced the idea that no one should be judged by their appearance or the role they played at any given moment. The flight attendant, too, took the lesson to heart. She realized that the consequences of her actions weren't limited to just this single event. Her behavior had affected not only the CEO and his family, but also her colleagues, her reputation, and the trust that her team had in her ability to handle difficult situations. This awareness of the broader implications of her actions became a turning point. It wasn't just about being more patient in the future, it was about acknowledging the need for personal and professional growth. She understood now that her role as a flight attendant was more than just a job, it was a responsibility to treat every person, regardless of their status or appearance, with dignity and respect. The passengers she interacted with were not mere inconveniences to be dealt with, but individuals with their own lives and stories. It was a mindset that would shape her future interactions, one that would guide her in navigating difficult situations with grace and humility. For everyone involved, the incident served as a profound reminder that life often presents us with moments that test our character. How we respond to those moments, how we treat others, and how we learn from our mistakes shapes who we are. In this case, what had started as a minor misunderstanding had transformed into an opportunity for growth, humility, and reflection. It reminded everyone that no matter how high someone's status or position might be, they are still human, deserving of kindness and respect. The experience underscored the dangers of underestimating others and the importance of never making assumptions about people based on their appearance, their job, or their background. In the end, both the flight attendant and the CEO emerged from the incident changed. The flight attendant had learned a valuable lesson in respect, humility, and understanding. The CEO, on the other hand, had reinforced his belief in the power of leadership through empathy and the importance of maintaining composure, even in the most trying circumstances. The incident became a defining moment for both, serving as a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected places. If you want to hear more stories of unexpected lessons, personal growth, and powerful moments, be sure to subscribe to Expect Stories for more inspiring and thought-provoking content.